The CEO Hour with Dean Akers. The mission? To help CEOs and startups succeed in today's marketplace. Entrepreneur or established CEOs, is your business growing? Where is your business going? Let's talk about it with your host, Dean Akers.
Well, welcome to the CEO Hour. I'm your host, Dean Akers, as I bring you top CEOs and entrepreneurs each week that share their journeys. This includes their thoughts and ideas that helped them in their success, and more importantly, a lot of things along the way that they learned that they want to pass on so that maybe you don't have to learn them the same way they did. And today I'd like to welcome a friend of mine, a friend of the city, former Tampa Mayor Bob Buckhorn. Welcome, Bob.
Dean, it's good to be here.
Man, I tell you what, here's how we do the journey, and it's always a lot of fun. So, July 1958, 29th, what happened?
Well, I was born. We were living in Chicago at the time, in Evanston, right outside the city. My dad was a reporter in Chicago.
Really?
Yeah. We were living in a rented house. I was the firstborn of what turned out to be three boys in our family, and subsequently moved 3 years later to the Northern Virginia area, Falls Church, where my dad took a job with United Press International, which was one of the wire services back in the day. It was always UPI and AP competing. And he was in Washington, D.C., which is where I grew up, in that Northern Virginia area.
Was he actually a reporter, or did he? He
was, at the end of his career, the transportation editor for United Press International. And so he was a full-fledged reporter covering largely transportation issues in D.C., but covered a lot of other different things. Until the day he died, that was his love. I mean, he loved being a reporter and loved the pace at the time. I mean, if you recall, John Kennedy had been elected president. It was a exciting time for this country. People fell in love with this young Irish Catholic, handsome, well-spoken family, both Jack and Jackie. And so for us as Irish Catholics, it was particularly a prideful moment for us. And, growing up in the D.C. area where politics is the currency, literally, of what you do, and what drives everything around there, unlike New York where it's money, in the district in Northern Virginia and the Maryland suburbs, it's all about politics and public policy. And so it's hard not to get infected. And I liken it to malaria. It never gets out of your system. You can inoculate yourself, but you're going to be infected. And that's exactly what happened to me.
So your dad, around the dinner table, probably had some interesting conversations.
He did, and interacted with some interesting people. Obviously, the times were different back then, and media coverage was different. You didn't have nonstop 24-hour cable news stations. You didn't have social media. These were real reporters who went out there and were grinding it out every day, developing sources, never printing anything unless they could verify it. And so it was a different environment. It was a heady environment. The country was in the midst of an exciting time with this young president. So it was an exciting time to be doing it. I mean, he was there during the Kennedy assassination. I attended Jack Kennedy's funeral as a little kid. I remember being down there, sitting on my dad's shoulders. I couldn't have been more than 6. It was a freezing cold day in the district, and hundreds of thousands of people showed up for that funeral. And I remember being down there, and so I was able to do things that most kids who didn't live in that environment, wouldn't have been able to experience. And so, he was there during Watergate. He was there during the Vietnam War. He was there during the Poor People's March and Martin Luther King's speech. So he really got to cover and experience a lot of historic events. And yeah, he would come home every day. And, I grew up literally with ink on my fingers, Dean, because there were always so many newspapers around the house. He would be reading 3-4 newspapers. They would be spread out all over the kitchen table. And as a kid, you would read them. And so right. I found myself not only delivering the Washington Post as a kid, but just being an avid reader of the news. My mother used to tell the funny story, when the Washington Post was a morning newspaper, so you had to get up at 5:30 in the morning, and I was probably 10 or 11. And periodically she would get complaints from the neighbors that their paper wasn't there. So she would get in her car and go out and find me, and I would be sitting on the curb reading the newspaper. Because it was more exciting to me to read the newspaper than it was to deliver the newspaper, especially in those frigid D.C. mornings. But I just became hooked and, always saw public service as the most admirable calling that you could have, because it was all about giving back, about being a servant, if you will, of the people.
Well, you were in the heart of it.
I was.
And your dad was immersed in it.
He was indeed, and it was an amazing place to grow up. I will tell you.
Did you capture any of his stories? Was he a father that would sit around and share stories?
He would. At the time, most of us, like most kids, were neck deep in sports and doing everything. So, we were involved in our world. But yeah, he would tell stories about either people that he met or things that he saw or stories that he wrote about or covered. Obviously, later in his career, when he became the editor, he was able to do a lot of really cool things. Like he covered the first supersonic flight from U.S. to England. He spent time down in Antarctica.
Wow.
I'm not sure doing what, but he was covering a story down there. So he was able to travel the world and cover a lot of pretty cool things. Spent time in the Soviet Union, spent time in the Eastern Bloc before the wall fell down or got taken down. So yeah, it was a great place to grow up. My mom was a homemaker, and most of us, we went to Catholic schools for the first 8 years and then transitioned over to the public high school, which was right down the road. And so I was always interested in public service. I'll tell you a funny story. I got the bug at an early age. And in 1968, Bobby Kennedy was running for president. And obviously Bobby was the heir to the Kennedy mantle, and obviously the one who had to bear the price of the tragedy of John Kennedy's assassination. I was 10. I used to have my mother drive me to Bobby Kennedy's campaign headquarters in the D.C. area, and she would leave me there. And I was a 10-year-old kid. I mean, you couldn't do this today. And I would sit there and I would stuff envelopes or put stamps on envelopes and do whatever they told me to do. But that's how early I got the bug. And
what an experience.
It was pretty cool for a 10-year-old kid. I still have a poster that I got from that campaign that I have on my office wall. But it forever seared me, if you will, in a positive way, because I saw the value of public service and what public service could do and how infectious it could be and how contagious it could be. And here you had the Kennedy family, obviously very, very, very wealthy. They didn't need to do this, but they felt obligated to give back. And what I loved the most about Bobby Kennedy in particular was here was this guy of means whose passion was for those who had no voice. And if you saw in his journey through Appalachia, he saw his journey through the African-American communities and the migrant communities, the farm workers in California, and you saw how that affected him and touched him and how he became their hero, really stuck with me forever.
Did you get to meet him?
No, I never met him. No.
That would have been, well, obviously, just being a part of his legacy, working with the campaign had to be really cool.
Well, working with it would be a stretch. You just, I was a 10-year-old kid.
No, that's true working, because that's dedication. I guarantee your parents were proud of you that you went in and stuck it out.
And I was running as Bobby Kennedy in my 4th grade class election. And obviously, that assassination probably is one of the things that I will never, ever forget. Like a lot of these things are seared in our memories, depending on our perspective and our seat at the table, if you will. But yeah, it's stuck with me to this day.
So now you go into high school, and when we come back to the second segment, we'll transition out of high school and go on to that journey where you go a little bit further north. But in high school, give us a couple quick things in high school that you finished up with. I
played a lot of sports. I mean, unlike today where these kids specialize in things, When you and I were growing up, every season you played a different sport.
Right.
It was football in the fall, it was basketball or wrestling or swimming in the wintertime. I played lacrosse, played soccer. So I was constantly busy and loved every minute of it. Had a great time. Enjoyed high school immensely. Probably didn't concentrate as much as I should have because it was not that challenging for me. Coming out of Catholic school with a rigorous academic preparation, high school was a little easy. And in hindsight, I probably should have gone to the Catholic high school because I think they would have pushed me a little bit harder.
Well, I would say, in hindsight, this is all our folks out there. In hindsight, everybody says what you say, and then they become mega successful. So I always go, hindsight's part of the journey, I guess.
Well, it prepared me well in high school because I was working on my social skills.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Which helped me later on down the road in terms of the networking.
You may have not known the book. Well, Will, this is, again, Dean Akers, your host of the CEO Hour. We've got former Mayor Bob Buckhorn with us today. Again, we'll be right back into the next segment talking more about Bob's journey, and I'm really interested to hear where he heads north for college.
The CEO Hour with your host, Dean Akers. Connect with Dean at deanakers.com. We'll be right back.
So, you're a tech startup. You're working hard, trying to make it happen with big ideas, big dreams, and a small budget. You need to connect with people in the same boat. Now is the time to join the early stage startup group, the Innovation Center, an incubator for early stage tech firms. You can find them at tbinnovates.com. Now operating for over 14 years, the Innovation Center is a regional, national, and internationally known success story, continuing to generate momentum in Pinellas County. Twice, the Innovation Center has won the Tampa Bay Technology Forum's Excellence in Service Award and has been recognized by Entrepreneur.com as a top 10 international business incubator. And now, Tech Garage, a technology and entrepreneurship center, has joined forces with the Innovation Center to provide a co-working program in downtown St. Petersburg. Connect with the startup community. Connect with the Innovation Center. Go to tbinnovates.com. That's tbinnovates.com. And tell them the Adjunct CEO sent you.
If you're a CEO or organizational leader looking to expand your business, join the CEO Council, where you'll meet and exchange ideas with fellow CEOs without the pressures of a sales network environment. You can join today by sending an email to application@adjunctceo.com. The CEO Council is comprised of over 220 fantastic local business leaders you'll be able to learn from because they walk in your shoes every day. When you become a member of the CEO Council, you'll have an opportunity to build trusted relationships during the roundtable meetings, share your triumphs, vet ideas, and work through business challenges with peers who can provide real-world business solutions. The CEO Council offers opportunities to hear from world-renowned speakers that inspire ideas to help members grow as both leaders and individuals. Join the CEO Council. Request your CEO Council membership application today at adjunctceo.com or by sending email to application@adjunctceo.com. That's application@adjunctceo.com.
Helping your business succeed in today's marketplace. Welcome back to the CEO Hour with Dean Akers.
Well, welcome back to segment 2 of the CEO Hour. Again, I'm your host, Dean Akers, bringing you top CEOs and entrepreneurs each week, sharing their journeys. Today we have former Tampa Mayor Bob Buckhorn. I can't call you former Tampa Mayor Bob. We have the mayor, Bob Buckhorn, on. I mean, he's to me, we won't even go there. The term limits, we won't even talk about.
Yeah.
We won't talk about that. That's not for this show.
My fishing has gotten a lot better as a result of that.
But at any rate, so you're growing up, you're in high school, and your dad is obviously an influence in your life. Tell me a little bit about his journey before you take off and leave home.
Sure, yeah. He stayed with UPI until about 1977. And then I started school in an out-of-state school, and my younger brothers were coming behind me. And so when you're a reporter at the time, it's hard to pay the bills on a reporter's salary. I mean, he didn't do that because of the money. He did it because he loved it and saw the value of a free press in a democratic country. So he went to work for the National Transportation Safety Board as the head of public affairs. And he was there for about, I think, 8 years, and then took over as head of public affairs for the Federal Aviation Administration. And so obviously dealing with a lot of tragedies, major transportation catastrophes, plane wrecks. He was down here for the Sunshine Skyway Bridge when the tanker hit that. He covered things as varied as the Leonard Skinner plane crash, the Air Florida 90 crash that went into the Potomac River. So the phone would ring at all hours of the night, and they would be calls from the media for him in the event something tragic had happened. He loved doing it and did it for another 15 years, I think, and retired in 1995.
That takes a special temperament, I would think.
It does. But, having been a reporter, he knows the beast. And that's what made him so good at his job, is he knew that they had a job to do and that it wasn't personal, and that his obligation was to get them as much information as quickly as they possibly could. So, because he had walked in their shoes. And so I think that brought a lot of value to the organization, is having someone there who had been on the other side and who knew what a deadline was and who knew how to get information to these reporters so that they could get their stories filed quickly so that the public could get the news.
It's funny, the guests we've had on over the last year, and they're sharing their journeys. There's a common thread there about, I'm going to call it DNA. Mm-hmm. Your dad's communication skills, his passion there, it's got to have rubbed off on you.
It did. Not just in terms of being a dad, but I was able to watch and to absorb and to appreciate what the working press goes through. Yeah. And so for me, I don't look at the press as an enemy like a lot of politicians do. I'm not fearful of them. They have a job to do. The good ones do their job well. But I'm not one of these elected officials who looks at the press as something to avoid. I look at the press as the vehicle by which I am able to tell my story. Now, they're not always going to write it the way I would prefer, but they're an important part of this country. And to see them being denigrated and to hear them, some of the things that we hear today is unfortunate, because we cannot have a democracy without a free press. And that is really, really important. It's not fake news just because you don't like it. They have a job to do. Sure. And their job is to tell the truth and to tell the country and the people of this country what's going on. But things as simple as, he would tell me, particularly when I moved into politics, he would say, son, don't ever give a one-day story legs. The translation of that is, if you messed up, admit that you messed up, tell people what you're going to do to fix the problem that you just created, and then move on.
Say that again, because that's such a powerful message. I want my listeners to turn their radios up right now.
Don't give a one-day story legs. Don't turn a one-day story into a 3-day story because you're obfuscating or you're hiding or you're lying or you're not available. It's better off for you to just fess up that, look, I made a mistake. This decision didn't go as I thought it was going to go. I did the best I could with the information I had, but I was wrong. People will forgive you if you admit that you're wrong. I mean, we're all human. We all make mistakes. What you don't want to do is prolong the agony, if you will, or give reporters a reason to not trust you or to keep digging. Hence, make it a one-day story and move on. Don't make it a 3-day story and give that story legs.
Wow, that's probably powerful advice even in the private world, dealing with even employees or things that happen where you get rumors within an organization and stuff. As
you know what I see, Dean, and I've seen it over and over again, is particularly my corporate brethren, if you will, who are running large institutions or organizations. They're not accustomed to dealing with the press, and their first reaction is to hide or to obfuscate or to hunker down and let the lawyers talk or the PR people. That's the worst thing that you can do. A leader is up front. A leader is going to make mistakes, but he's going to own those mistakes. A leader is someone who is willing to admit when he or she is wrong and take corrective action and move on. That's what shareholders expect. That's what voters expect. That's what your employees expect. And you should expect the same out of the people that work for you. And so It's a valuable lesson to learn, but most CEOs who have been shielded from the media and from those uncomfortable questions for a long time, the higher they go. For me as the mayor, I dealt with the press every day, and I always tried to be as open as I possibly could with them, even when I was wrong. Saying you're sorry or that you were wrong is not a bad thing, because people will give you a lot of rope if they trust you, and you are willing to acknowledge that you are a human being and that you are going to make mistakes, and that your company's going to make mistakes.
We had I'm not part of the show is to tell my stories, but I had one of those epic events happen to me when my truck, I don't know if you ever remember this, back in the 80s, one of my trucks ran a stop sign up near Gainesville on the Friday before Labor Day weekend and hit a school bus of handicapped orphan kids, killed 6, put 22 in the hospital. So we had, your dad was probably here, National Transportation Safety Board. We had every major network. And of course, this was in the 80s, so we didn't have 24/7 news. And, I just was very transparent. I mean, we didn't try to kill, and everything. And we got a lot of good, not good because it happened, but by being, to your point, by being vulnerable, it made a big difference instead of hiding and no comments and everything else.
Well, especially in this turbulent times in which we live, particularly in a political world, people are looking and they're dying for authenticity. They're dying for folks who are willing to step up and take ownership and acknowledge that perhaps they made a mistake and move on. That's the best thing that any leader of an organization can do is to be authentic and to recognize that you're not always going to have a great day.
Well, for our listeners out there, especially our younger aspiring entrepreneurs and stuff, I think sometimes, do they ever get kind of gladed over or whatever with social media where everything always looks perfect?
Sure. They do. Yeah.
Authentic, what a great word. I wonder how many people could look in the mirror today and say, this is my authentic me. Do you think that's a challenge? Sure
it is. Particularly the higher you climb and the more that's at stake, whether it's, your own personal, and in my case, political aspirations or reelection or popularity or your favorable ratings, or in the case of a CEO who's got to deal with shareholders and a public perception. I think authenticity gets you a lot further than just being glib or just being able to hide behind other people. People want leaders who are going to step out and lead from the front, not from the rear.
Had breakfast today, just coincidentally, with a retiring Green Beret, 24-year Green Beret, Master Sergeant, always in combat. And he commented about the two biggest leaders. And it's funny, I'm going to write that word in more down for me to use in the future. But he used the exact same word with his troops. When he was leading 20 people into a bad town, he said, Dean, I had to be authentic with them for them to come into battle with me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, people are going to believe in you and they're going to trust you, and they want to know that you're willing to risk as much as they are and that you have as much at stake as they do, and that you lead from the front. I mean, I would imagine that particularly for those young special operators that he was leading, the fact that he was out there with them, sleeping in that foxhole with them and leading from the front as opposed to the rear. And I understand that, when you climb the ranks, it's a little bit harder to do as a 4-star than it is as a lieutenant colonel. But some of the best leaders that I know, including some in the military, whether it's Admiral McRaven or Admiral Olson or Tony Thomas, I mean, they led from the front, and their men wanted to follow them into battle because of it.
Bob, we're going to go to break here, and I want to remind our listeners out there that if you want to, you can reach at help@adjunctceo.com anytime, and we're going to give you our sales and leadership program for free. That's for you. And also the 3 Circle sales programs available now at help@adjunctceo.com. And we'll be right back with more with Bob Buckhorn, our Mayor Bob Buckhorn, former Mayor Bob Buckhorn, in segment 3.
helping established CEOs and entrepreneurs. Connect with Dean at deanakers.com. The CEO Hour continues in a moment. Helping to navigate today's marketplace for startups and mainstays. Welcome back to the CEO Hour with Dean Akers.
Well, welcome back to segment 3. Again, this is Dean Akers, your host of the CEO Hour, bringing you top CEOs and entrepreneurs every week that share their journeys, that includes their thoughts, ideas, and things that helped them in their success, and also things they might have wished they didn't do or learned not to do again. Today we have former Mayor Bob Buckhorn with us, and he's been sharing some great things in the first 2 segments. I mean, Bob, be authentic in the break we were talking about. So that's just so powerful. It's crazy. Your dad was a pretty authentic individual, I would guess.
Oh, yeah.
So now you're graduating from high school. You get your diploma. Now what happens?
Well, I headed off to the far reaches of Pennsylvania to a little school called Penn State. And it's interesting, Dean, how I got there. I had never stepped foot on the campus before. And unlike today, where you go on these visits and these tours, and I did it with my oldest daughter last year. We traveled all over looking at colleges. We didn't do that when we were kids. I never stepped foot. None of my friends stepped foot on any college campus. We knew, based on reputation, where we wanted to go and where we thought it would be of most value to us. So I chose Penn State. And one of the reasons I chose Penn State is because my mother grew up in Brooklyn with Joe Paterno.
Really?
Yeah. Coach Paterno lived on the same street as my mom. My mom was from a big Irish family, and the Paternos were obviously an Italian family. And to the day Coach Paterno died, my uncles were some of his best friends from the old neighborhood. And my mother, the first day I was at Penn State, dragged me by my ear, took me into Coach Paterno's office, and we said to the receptionist up front, we didn't have an appointment. And my mom said, could you please tell Joe that Rita Murnane is here? And Rita Murnane was obviously her maiden name. And we'd like to see him. And I'm like, Coach Paterno's not coming out here. You don't have an appointment, Mom. Why are you dragging me here? And sure enough, out comes Coach Paterno and took us back into his office. And the entire 4 years that I was there, whenever he saw me, he would say, hey, little Murnane, how you doing? How's school? You going to class? I mean, really cared about me as an individual and making sure that I was indeed having a good academic experience. And I could see how he was the same way with his players. I was a student athlete at Penn State. I played lacrosse for Penn State. I was a walk-on and made the varsity team. I didn't play much, but I was cannon fodder largely.
Oh, yeah.
But I was on the team and happy to do my part. But I saw Coach Paterno and how that ethos of Joe Paterno permeated that university. And particularly for student athletes, you were a student first and an athlete second. And I saw how he ran that program, and I saw the discipline he instilled in those young men, and how they perhaps didn't like him when they were playing for him, but they realized what an amazing mentor he was for them as they became men. Because that's what he taught you how to do, is to become a man. And so my 4 years at Penn State was a great experience. I loved it. Majored in political science.
So this all goes back to that whole almost sitting on the curb reading about politics.
Absolutely. Yeah, it never left me. It's that malaria. It never gets out of your system. My oldest daughter is a freshman there now at Penn State, so I'm able to reconnect with the university. And obviously I've been gone for almost 40 years now, but it is still a very, very special place to me. And I'm very excited that my oldest daughter is having a great freshman year. Academically, she's doing a whole lot better than I did my first semester.
Did she get any arm twisting?
I tried to be objective.
Yeah.
I drove her, and it was largely just she and I. I drove her all over the SEC, if you will, looking at schools. She got accepted to a number of them. She applied to Penn State. She was put on the waiting list at first because Penn State had 80,000 applications for the freshman class of 8,000 people. So their algorithms were all messed up. So it took a while for them to sort through all of these things. And so she got off the waiting list and was accepted. And so it got down to Penn State and FSU, which is another great university. And she chose Penn State. And while I was silently saying yes, my wife looks at me and she says, "You are going back to work soon, aren't you? Because we're now paying out-of-state tuition." And so I said, "Yes, dear, I'm going back to work. Go Penn State." So it was great, and she's loving it. You know, and to her credit, Dean, and I was really excited for her as she made this decision. She went to the Academy of the Holy Names for her entire career. Great school, great education, well prepared. But she wanted to get out of her South Tampa bubble and go to a place where she didn't know anybody, because she thought it was going to expand her horizons. You know, if she had gone to any of the Florida schools, she would have been there with the same girls that she went to school with for 16 years or 12 years in the same sororities.
Oh, yeah.
And not much would have changed. And more power to her. When she stepped foot on that campus, she didn't know anybody and has made a whole new set of friends from different parts of the country. And I think that is great for her. And I think it will force her to grow up and to mature and to adapt. Where it would have been very easy to go to a Florida school and just fall into the same, habits and with the same circle of friends.
I guarantee you, when she comes home for the holidays and then when she comes home for the summer, if she comes home, it's going to be epic for you and your wife.
Yeah,
it's going to be.
It's exciting. And I always told her, I said, "Sweetie, we're going to support you wherever you go, and we're blessed that we're able to afford to send you wherever you go. But go where you're going to interact with the kids that are going to run the world, not just the kids that are going to run Florida. You can always come home." If, she says she wants to go to law school. You could always come back and go to UF or FSU law school, and you're going to do just fine. But go for this 4-year period and meet a whole new group of kids from all over the world that are going to be doing different things in different places, and you will be better because of it.
She doesn't sound like she's a particularly dumb cookie.
No, she's good. I mean, she's very social.
But she also, to get into Penn State, she had to have done well academically.
She had to work hard.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for her and proud of her. She's majoring in political science, so gosh knows she may stay in the family business. But she's having a great time and loving everything about Penn State.
So now you've graduated from Penn State. What brought you to Tampa?
Interesting. I'll make this short. When I got out of school, I moved out to Colorado for a little bit because I wanted to ski. But I also was applying for Navy flight school because I wanted to fly jets for the Navy, and was accepted for aviation officer candidate school. And so I packed up my car and what few possessions that I had and drove to Pensacola Naval Air Station, which is where you go through aviation officer candidate school before you start flight school. I mean, to me, I had signed up, I had volunteered, passed all the Class A flight physicals, had committed to 7 years in the military, because that at the time was what the pilot requirements were. And so I drove to Pensacola Naval Air Station, and in the first week, after going through a whole another series of physical tests, they diagnosed me as having a degeneration of one of my corneas.
Really?
Obviously, for a fighter pilot, or an aspiring fighter pilot, the Navy wasn't willing to risk that, and so they discharged me. And so I was 23 years old, 22 years old. My whole world had just collapsed, because that's what I wanted to do, was fly jets. And I had a fraternity brother from Penn State who had just gotten married and was living in Tampa. And so I packed up my 66 Dodge Dart. I had $300 in discharge pay. I had my what's called a DD-214, which is an honorable discharge. I had no air conditioning in that car. I had one suit, and I had nowhere else to go. And so I drove from Pensacola Naval Air Station, this was, I think, 1982, to Tampa, Florida, and slept on my buddy's couch. The last thing his wife wanted to see was me. And that's how I got started here. I didn't know anybody. I didn't come from anything. He moved 6 months later, and then I literally didn't know anybody here. And I never left. And I just started scratching and clawing my way up through the political world here, volunteering in campaigns. First campaign I volunteered for was Pat Frank.
Oh, wow.
Who was a state rep at the time. And then she introduced me to Sandy Friedman, who was a city council member, chairman of the city council, who was getting ready to run for mayor. And so I, 2 years before she ran, just started working with Sandy Friedman and ended up coordinating her campaign. And then I came on board as her special assistant, where I spent 8 years. But literally, that's how I got to Tampa, with nothing, with nobody, with no connections, just a willingness to roll up my sleeves and do every dirty job that I had to do, and volunteered over and over again on different campaigns, and that's how I started moving through the system.
Okay, before we go to the break, because we're getting ready to go to break, it's on my bucket list, but you've been the mayor of Tampa, and you know every 4-star out of McDill. Have you had your jet ride? I
have had an F-16 ride.
That's on my bucket list. Is it a rush?
It is the most amazing thing that I pulled a 9G. I got a certificate for pulling a 9G turn. It is amazing. It is what I imagined it would be. And to this day, and I'm 61 years old, to this day, every time I hear a jet go over my house on Davis Island, because we're right on the approach, I go outside and watch it. I mean, I'm still like a little kid when it comes to naval aviation and aviation in general. So yeah, it is a thrill. It is an absolute thrill.
Well, it's on my bucket list, and I make no bones about it when I'm out working at McDill. If there's ever a vacant seat and you need somebody to ride it, I'm going to be there. So we'll be back in just a moment with Bob Buckhorn in segment 4.
Success never takes the weekend off. Connect with Dean at deanakers.com. The CEO Hour continues in a moment.
Growth begins by understanding where you are now. For a limited time, business growth experts at Adjunct CEO will provide a full CEO physical of your business valued at $10,000 for free. Email ceophysical@adjunctceo.com. This offer includes financial, marketing, and sales analysis and an outline to help you strategize future success. For your free CEO physical, email ceophysical@adjunctceo.com. ceophysical@adjunctceo.com. Florida ranks high as a new hub for business growth and innovation. Startups, restarts, and starting over are all part of the new vitality generated as geography and economic opportunity collide. As Florida's entrepreneurial ecosystem grows, many are using Synapse to grow their business. Synapse is a groundbreaking methodology that connects all personas within the innovation economy, utilizing a method that enables all users to progress in meeting their given needs while promoting much-needed community engagement. Never more than now has Florida presented opportunity to be better aligned in business, providing huge potential for greater overall results with strong collaboration and holistic leadership. Synapse is a growth synthesis platform that will allow you to take advantage and flourish in ways you never thought possible as an entrepreneur, as a business, and within the context of community, events, connections, publishing, all with Synapse. See for yourself at synapsefl.com. That's synapsefl.com.
Helping your business succeed in today's marketplace. Welcome back to the CEO Hour with Dean Akers.
Welcome back to the CEO Hour again. Your host, Dean Akers, here bringing you top CEOs and entrepreneurs. This week we have the former Tampa Mayor, Bob Buckhorn, friend of all of us in the Tampa Bay area, sharing his journey. And Bob, you've had this epic journey. You went to Penn State. You end up in Tampa, driving a car down here and stuff. You start in politics. What got you to actually say, I want to be the leader of this great city?
Great question. I think it started out during my time as the assistant to the mayor for Sandy Friedman, and I saw firsthand how powerful the job is. I mean, people don't realize that the mayor of Tampa is one of the strongest mayor forms of government in the country by charter. The mayor doesn't sit on city council. There's no city manager. You are, in essence, the CEO of 4,400 employees, a $1 billion budget, and all that comes with that. It is no different than being the CEO of Tampa Electric or any other major corporation in the country. I mean, you have all of those responsibilities, plus you have to balance the politics of it, which most CEOs are shielded from. So I saw during my time with Sandy Friedman how powerful the job could be and how you could move the needle. and how you could impact a city and how you could shape a city to a much greater degree than any other job in politics. Most jobs in politics, if you're elected to the legislature or to the Congress, all you do is talk. And you get bogged down in partisan issues, and everyone retreats to their corners, and you really don't get a lot done. I ran for office to do and not to be. A lot of people in politics run for office to be. And I knew that if I wanted to do the most for the city that I had adopted and that had adopted me, the only place that I could do that from is from the office of mayor. And so I spent 8 years with Sandy. I was elected twice to the city council. I then ran for mayor in 2003 and lost to my dear friend, former Mayor Pam Iorio. And so I was in the political wilderness for 8 years, from 2003 until 2011. And when I came back in 2011, and this is an important part of the story, Dean, and not only my story, but of Tampa's story. When I came back in 2011, almost to a person, everyone said, there's no way that you're going to win. You've lost multiple times before. It was almost like they were defining me by my losses. You're running against some really powerful people, including four-time former Mayor Dick Greco, who I love to death, county commissioners, three other candidates that had never lost a race before. And I had not only lost the mayor's race, but I had lost two others over the course of my career. And so people said, you're not going to win. Don't do this. You're not going to win. That was my wife telling me that. And I said, no, what you don't understand is my pain threshold is a lot higher than yours. And I'm going to do whatever it takes, and I'm going to push myself harder than everyone else in this race. I may not have the endorsements. I may not have the money. I may not have all the support, but you are not going to outwork me. And two, the other thing I said is I'm not losing my kids to Charlotte, North Carolina, because you remember, Dean, at that time, the mass exodus of our children and grandchildren for other places and cities that were successful in creating jobs was a one-way street. We were a donor city of talent to other places, and I wasn't going to lose my kids. And so during the course of that campaign, we knocked on 20,000 doors.
Wow. I
know every dog in the city of Tampa. Through the heat of the summer, when no one else was out there walking, we were out there walking. And I can tell you, after you've walked door to door for 10 hours in the middle of July and your head's about to explode and you're seeing double because of the heat, it will take a quick measure of the person inside of you and how bad you want this. Now, also remember that Tampa was in the midst of the worst recession since the Great Depression. Tampa, like me, had been knocked flat. People had written us off. They said you weren't getting up off the mat. They said, Buckhorn, you're not going to win this race. They said, Tampa, you're never going to succeed, that you're always going to be a third-tier city and with a service economy. Don't even bother trying to get up off the mat, Tampa, Florida, because you're not going to get up. Well, I won. And look at where Tampa is now. And so that journey for the last 8 years of both me and Tampa, we've been on a parallel path together. Both of us broken down. Both of us having to decide whether we were going to get up or not. Both of us having to wash the blood off our face and straighten out our nose and decide whether or not we're going to quit or whether we're going to succeed. And I think together, we've created one of the most exciting cities in America. A place where talent is not leaving, but talent is flocking here. And these young people are moving here in droves. We're a city that has its swagger back. We've got a narrative that says, in essence, we don't ask anybody's permission anymore, that we can compete for anything. And while we're not always going to win, we are always going to be in the game. There's not a discussion taking place in America today of a corporate relocation, either a pending or potential, in which Tampa's not in the discussion. This is a radically different city than what it was 8 years ago when I got it. And part of it was because, like any company or like any CEO, it's not about the victories don't define you. It's what you do in the defeats that define you. And this city got up off the mat and decided it was going to take its place amongst great American cities, and literally forced itself to believe that our best days are yet to come. And
well, but it took your leadership, because I can tell you, I've known you for a long time, and I got to be honest with you. I saw Bob Buckhorn when he became mayor that was different than a Bob Buckhorn I knew 15 years earlier.
Well, we're all, and that's probably true.
I saw a Bob Buckhorn that was able to share vision, but create consensus and drive this city. I got to be honest with you, I was so impressed and have been so impressed with what you've done as CEO of Tampa, and to your point, the swagger you put back in it. And I think you're underestimating what your total contribution to that was.
Well, I mean, I think leaders arrive at the right time.
Good point.
And what I have seen over the years is the voters, even though one time it was at my expense, are discerning enough to pick the right person at the right time for where this city is and where it's going. And it just so happened that my skill set at that particular point in Tampa's evolution turned out to be the right skill set. And because I had tasted defeat, and because I knew what that felt like, and because I knew it didn't kill me, it just made me stronger. And because I had some years in the wilderness to create and to see what was working around the country and how mayors succeeded or failed, it turned out to be the right person at the right time for where we are today. And so, I mean, you know this, Dean. I mean, I drove that narrative every day, every speech, every time I got up and talked about what the vision was, what it was going to take to get there, how we were going to get there together, and what it was going to look like when we got there. And so every day for 8 years, I never stopped beating that drum until it became part of Tampa's DNA. And the people that live here saw that it was not just political talk or happy talk, that they saw concrete results, whether it was the completion of the Riverwalk or hosting the Republican National Convention or the development of Eulalie or Tampa Armature. And people all of a sudden woke up and said, dang, this is a really cool place. And that their chest started to swell, and that sense of pride became part of who they are, to the point now where it doesn't matter much what the politicians do, because I think the business community in particular has so bought into this narrative and this vision that they're not going to let the politicians distract us from where we're going.
Well, I'm really proud of you. In the closing couple minutes we have, give us kind of sum up, because your journey's been epic. I've learned so much today. To drive from Pensacola to Tampa after failing your dream because of your situations, you're tenacious and everything else. Give our listeners out there a tip that we want to leave them with today of the Bob Buckhorn Make It Happen legacy.
Don't be defined by your defeats. I mean, you're going to get knocked down. You're going to get the tar kicked out of you. Your dreams are going to be deferred. Sometimes they're going to be shelved. But if you are always willing to get up off the mat, good things are going to happen to you.
Well, I certainly appreciate you coming on today, Bob. I mean, it's been special. You've been a dear friend, and don't get defined by your defeats, being authentic, and I really like don't give a one-day story legs. So I've got a lot of takeaway. I know our listeners out there got a lot of takeaway today. Again, we appreciate our listeners listening every week to the CEO Hour, and we also appreciate all the feedback we get from our listeners, questions and comments at help@adjunctceo.com, help@adjunctceo.com, and also feel free to reach out for our CEO Physical or our 3-Circle sales program. Say that 5 times. And again, all you have to do is anything you need from us is help@adjunctceo.com. If you want to hear this again, it'll be up as a podcast of the Adjunct CEO Hour. It comes up a week after we are on the station. And Bob, thanks again for coming in.
Dean, I appreciate it. And to the voters who gave me the dream job that I've always wanted, thank you. It was an honor. I hope I made you proud.
You always do. See everybody next week.
Thanks for listening to this CEO Hour with Dean Akers, helping businesses and CEOs succeed in today's marketplace. Receive a free CEO physical when you connect with Dean at deanakers.com. That's deanakers.com. And join us again next week for the CEO Hour with Dean Akers.